You've heard the science tree of life. We're going to start with a different story now, the one that's recorded in the Bible. And what we're going to do is read from the Hebrew scriptures called the Tanakh. And so it will sound familiar and sound also a little different. And it goes like this. When God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God sweeping over the water, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, a first day.
God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, that it may separate water from water." God made the expanse, and it separated the water which was below the expanse from the water which was above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse sky. And there was evening, and there was morning, a second day.
God said, "Let the water below the sky be gathered into one area, that the dry land may appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters God called seas. And God saw that this was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, seed-bearing plants, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants of every kind, and trees of every kind, bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that this was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a third day.
God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate day from night. They shall serve as signs for the set times, the days and the years, and they shall serve as lights in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights to shine upon the earth, one to dominate the day and the lesser light to dominate the night, and the stars. God set them in the expanse of the sky to shine upon the earth, to dominate the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that this was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day.
And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and birds that fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky." God created the great sea monsters, and all the living creatures of every kind that creep, which the waters brought forth in swarms, and all the winged birds of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fertile and increase, fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, a fifth day.
God said, "Let the earth bring forth every kind of living creature, cattle, creeping things, and wild beasts of every kind." And it was so. God made wild beasts of every kind, and cattle of every kind, and all kinds of creeping things of the earth. God saw that this was good. May these words be to us our light and our life.
Thanks be to God. Today we begin our celebration of creation season, a liturgical season begun in 2000 by a Lutheran pastor in Australia. By 2004, the season had been adopted by the Uniting Church of Australia, and from there it quickly spread to Protestant churches throughout the world. Following the Pope's encyclical letter on creation and integral ecology, released in 2015, many more Catholic churches adopted the season as well. The Christian liturgical calendar revolves around the life and the death and ministry of Jesus. The idea behind creation season is to focus on God as the creator of the earth and on our responsibility for its care. The season was created in part in response to the lament heard frequently in April after Earth Day, namely, why does the earth set aside only one Sunday to focus on the earth, its creator, and our responsibilities to both? Against the overwhelming silence of corporate media over what we first called the environmental crisis, and then global warming, and then climate change, and now climate chaos, many of the churches that observe creation season have been at the forefront of earth-centered advocacy. They have used creation season to increase the sense of wonder at the natural world, but also to encourage movement away from a carbon-based world toward a more ecological civilization. By now, a whole series of worship themes, biblical readings, and liturgical resources has emerged based on the 3-year cycle that mimics the lectionary reading, or the lectionary cycle followed by many churches, including this one. But where Mac Plymouth differs is that from year to year, we've picked our own themes, created our own readings and liturgies. So far we've focused on water, on soil, on trees, and this year we picked a doozy. Evolution. You know, a topic universally accepted, free from all controversy. We chose this theme for a bunch of reasons. Speaking for myself, I find it fascinating, but I also think that when fundamentalist faith is taught as science, I'm referring here to creationism, it's important for our kids in this church to know where we stand and for us to be clear about that. This familiar ground for us anyway, the hysteria and the denial that scientists of evolution faced is not unlike the hysteria and denial that climate scientists face today. So as your theologian in residence, it's my job to tee up the series, specifically to talk about evolution and how it relates to the Bible and theology. So plunging right in, is there evidence for evolution in the Bible? Short answer, no. Because the Bible is no more a book of science than it is a book of history. Of course, there's more to it than that flip answer, but I'll get to that later. It has been almost 100 years since the famous Scopes monkey trial, of which Clarence Darrow faced off against biblical literalist William Jennings Bryan to defend a high school teacher's right to teach evolution. It was American culture wars at its best. Smackdown between liberals and fundamentalists, grandstanding speeches, a hysterical press, a packed courtroom, and even a death in the last act. The whole thing was high theater, and in fact the story was turned into a well-known play and movie called Inherit the Wind. In the end, the defense requested a guilty verdict so that it could be appealed to a higher court. Each side then declared victory, but that hasn't stopped fundamentalists from resisting evolutionary teachings to this day, or school boards from demanding that creationism be taught as science. We live in a world that in November will observe the 160th anniversary of the publication of Darwin's The Origin of Species. Everyone in this room was born in a world where evolution is a given. So what's at stake about this idea that riles religious fundamentalists so much? What's at stake? I am not going to rehearse the science-religion debate, because for progressive Christians that is so last century. But Darwin is solidly in a trajectory of scientists whose discoveries forced us to reconsider who we are, where we are in the scheme of things, and how God works in the world, if at all. That is, their discoveries were not only groundbreaking for science, but they also had a profound impact on theology, major theological implications. So it's worth taking a look at a few. There was Copernicus, who in 1543 upended the Western world by claiming that the earth moves around the sun rather than the other way around. That did not go over well with the church. Then Galileo proved that heliocentric hypothesis with his telescope was true, and that didn't go any better. He was forced by the Inquisition to recant, although as he was leaving the courtroom, he supposedly muttered, "All the same, it moves." So what was the big deal? In a word, truth, with a capital T. We can get a bit of a taste of this when we ask what news source is authoritative for you. Or, admittedly, this is shorthand, where do you get your news, Fox or MSNBC? In the wake of scientists like Copernicus, Galileo, and Darwin, the question was, what is your ultimate authority for truth? Is it the Bible or science? Who has the power? Is it God, as interpreted by theologians, God who constrains kings, establishes the social order, and dictates personal morality? Or is it an impersonal universe, as interpreted by humanist philosophers and scientists, who separated human beings from the natural world and describe a world ordered by laws of nature and cosmic positioning? It was bad enough for the church in the 16th century, but they had no idea what was coming. The Bible put the earth at the center of the universe and human beings at the center as the crown of creation. We were important. We were the center of God's universe. And then, like a toddler who discovers that his baby brother has displaced him from the center of mom's attention, Galileo's descendants discovered just how far from the center we really are. Just remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving and revolving at 900 miles an hour. It's orbiting at 19 miles a second, so it's reckoned a sun that is the source of all our power. Now the sun and you and me and all the stars that we can see are moving at 1,000,000 miles a day in an outer spiral arm at 40,000 miles an hour of a galaxy we call the Milky Way. Thank you, Monty Python. Not the center of the universe. But not even the center of our galaxy. Our galaxy isn't even at the center of the universe, but we're an outer spiral arm. We're in the boondocks. How can we claim to be special? At least the Bible says we matter. Even if to the universe we're apparently insignificant, human beings are made in the image of God. And then along came Darwin. In the eyes of his detractors, Darwin overthrew God and bestialized humanity. Crown of creation? Created in God's image? No, descended from the apes, one animal among others. But what those detractors missed, or maybe not, is what the impulse was behind Darwin's quest. Although Britain had abolished slavery in 1833, the Atlantic slave trade was still a prominent issue in Darwin's era. And the slave traders used the idea of Africans as a subspecies, or a different species altogether, to justify the cruelty that they were inflicting. From a trove of newly published papers, we've learned that Darwin was driven to find scientific evidence to thwart the slave trade. He was determined to find evidence for blood kinship between the peoples of Africa and Europe. He wanted to find a scientific basis for ending slavery and the dehumanization of African peoples. Darwin did not want to annihilate Adam and Eve, as some critics said. He was seeking a basis for Adamic unity or universal brotherhood. And that, friends, is a theological concept. But wait, there's more. Darwin's novel contribution to biology is the idea that species are not immutable. They change over the course of time in order to adapt themselves to a changing external environment. Lines separating species are not fixed, as ancient and medieval thinkers believed, and this was profoundly troubling, especially to people with a stake in the dubious idea of racial purity. So with all this in mind, let's turn now to that creation story in Genesis. The version that we read from the Jewish Tanakh differs from the King James translation that some of us grew up with, which reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." That's a one and done version. God created, implying a finished product. In the NRSV, which we read today, there is a slight difference. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. But the verb is still past tense. God creating, meaning an action completed in the past. But the Tanakh reads, when God began to create. This is a creation that is still ongoing. So when I said earlier that there is no evidence of evolution in the Bible, that was true. The Bible does not contain scientific evidence. But there are suggestions of compatibility between the poetic vision of an unfinished, ongoing creation and the scientific assertion of a still evolving planet. At this point, I'm reminded that the word Genesis does not just mean origin, it also means becoming, ongoing. In other words, creation is not a one and done. Creation is an act of becoming, it is ongoing, it is processive, and it is responsive to its changing environment, which is to say, it is relational. But there's something else in the Jewish translation that some Christian theologians find especially meaningful. When God began to create the heavens and the earth is described as being unformed and void with darkness over the surface of the deep. Unformed and void with darkness over the surface of the deep. The Hebrew phrase for unformed and void shows up in a couple of other places in the prophets where it signifies chaos. And that brings me back to Darwin. Something more troubling to his contemporaries than species mutation was the randomness of Darwin's theories, implied in the workings of nature. This randomness contradicted the early modern assumption of a rational order to the universe. Unlike the rational order of Newton's world that runs like clockwork, Darwin's world is one of conflict, not harmony. Unlike the rational order of Newton's world that seemed to require the mind of a divine designer who made cosmic machine so that all its parts would fit together harmoniously, Darwin's world is chaotic and brutal. And maybe that's why the idea of a completed creation is so appealing. We don't like the idea of ongoing chaos. No matter how bad things get, the world won't descend again into primordial chaos. But Darwin's theory of evolution, whether expressly stated or not, subtly undermines this idea. If creation isn't fixed, if it's ongoing, can it be undone? And now I move unabashedly from the language of science to the language of faith. Can creation be undone? No. Not according to the understanding of God expressed in Genesis 1. In that all-important opening verse, God is creating the world out of chaos, and creation is ongoing, and the implication is that, yeah, sure, unfortunately, chaos, like creation, is never one and done. We can speak of that reality ourselves, whether based on the current state of our planet, our democracy, or our personal experiences, but chaos never has the last word. God is always creating order out of chaos. Whether it's the chaos of the Big Bang or the chaos of yesterday's news. God takes what is and guides it to what it can become. Last week, we all witnessed, from both Fox and MSNBC and whatever else in the middle you listen to, we all witnessed the devastation in the Bahamas caused by Hurricane Dorian. And then coverage of the hurricane was interrupted by yet another mass shooter, and we all carry within us our own heartaches and our concerns. But, like the seed-bearing plants in the creation story, we all also carry within us seeds of hope. And the seeds, like Darwin's species, mutate. They grow and they change and they adapt to changes in the environment so that we have the strength we need to withstand whatever strikes us from without or unfolds from within. God does not create chaos. God does not control events on earth. But God calls us out of the wreckage of what has happened toward what is possible now. In other words, ours is not a religion of restoration, it is a religion of redemption. God takes the world as it is, whether it is unformed and void, whether it is a defeated people in exile, whether it is a crucifixion on a hillside, or whether it is a planet in peril, whether it is emptiness within us. God takes what is and guides it toward what it can be. Christianity is a religion of redemption. It accepts what is and calls us forward to what we can be now. So can we find evolution in the Bible? No. Is evolution compatible with our faith? Yes. And God sees that this is very good.